Good evening, dear President, President-elect, past presidents, the speaker today, Engineer Dr. Anand Ranasinghe, council members, relatives of Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe, members of the IESL, staff of the IESL, and other invitees. You all are welcome to the 15th memorial oration of Engineer Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe. To start the memorial oration, let's light up the traditional oil lamp. I cordially invite following dignitaries to light the oil lamp. Engineer K.P.I.U. Dharmapala, President of IESL. Engineer Arjuna Manampeni, President-elect of IESL. Two senior most past presidents, Engineer Dr. Anand Ranasinghe, our speaker today, a family member of late Engineer Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe, Engineer Lalit Pallegama, Chairman, Civil Engineering Sectional Committee, the IESL, and Engineer Neela Besekara, CEO, Executive Secretary. Thank you very much. Next item, the most important item today, garland the photograph of late Deshabandhu Engineer Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe. I now respectfully invite the President of the IESL, Engineer K.P.I.U. Dharmapala, to garland the photograph electronically. Thank you very much, sir. Now it is the time to deliver the welcome address. I cordially invite the President of IESL to deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, President, we can hear you.
I hope most of you have been to Colombo Planetarium or Kalutara Chaitya. Did you ever think about the creator of these incredible landmarks in Sri Lanka? This planetarium was established on 1965, 1st February, by the State Engineering Corporation of Sri Lanka as a special feature for the Ceylon Industrial Exhibition held in Colombo in the same year. The building has a reinforced concrete floor and a pre-stressed concrete folded plate roof, which was precast on site. This planetarium was designed by the then Chief Engineer from the State Engineering Corporation, Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe. The magnificent Kalutara Chaitya or Stupa stand tall and proud, marking to the entrance to the city of Kalutara. The Kalutara Chaitya is such a unique creation as it happens to be the only hollow Buddhist stupa in the world. This pioneer project in Sri Lankan engineering was engineered by the late Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe, who introduced pre-stressed concrete technology to Sri Lanka. The dome was built using hemispherical thin concrete shells, and relevant calculation that was done by the first computer in Sri Lanka owned by the State Engineering Corporation. The proposal to construct a hollow structure by Dr. Kulasinghe had some dissenting views. Professor Senarath Paranavitana, renowned archaeological archaeologists opposed the idea because this was completely a radical idea in contrast to the ancient stupa construction. Dr. Kulasinghe argued against this and eventually he succeeded in persuading the authorities and went on to build the grand structure. In our journey, there have been so many engineering giants whom we can consider as pillars of Sri Lankan engineering construction and engineering education. Among such memorable persons, today we commemorate such a great character whom we cannot forget and could be considered as the father of concrete technology in Sri Lanka, who is none other than one of our past presidents, Engineer Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome all participants here today for Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe Memorial Oration. I start with our resource person today, Engineer Dr. Ananda Ranasinghe, Engineer Lalit Pallegama, Chairman, Civil Engineering Sectional Committee, past presidents, council members, members of the ISL, Engineer Neil Abeysekara, Executive Secretary, Chief Executive Officer of the institution, family members and relatives of the late Engineer Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe, other invitees, ladies and gentlemen. Deshabandhu Vidya Jyoti Arumadura Nandasena Silva Kulasinghe was a Sri Lankan civil engineer and founder of several engineering organizations in Sri Lanka. Was born in Udammita in Jayala on 26 October 1919. He first studied at Vaduva English Boys College and then moved to Marista College, Negombo. Thereafter, he entered to St. Benedict's College, Kotahena for his advanced level studies. He entered the Ceylon Technical College to study for the BSc in Engineering of the University of London. There he won the Sri Chandrasekhara Scholarship, graduating in 1936. He gained associate membership of the Institution of Civil Engineers, London in 1946. In 1940, Dr. Kulasinghe joined the Norton Bridge Hydropower project as a technical assistant, and in 1944, he joined Colombo Harbour as a junior assistant engineer. Dr. Kulasinghe focused on cost technologies, innovative construction techniques, and utilization of local resources in his engineering pursuits. His super skills contributed in the areas of precast concrete, pre-stressed concrete, alternative low-cost construction materials, ferro-cement boat building, application of shell design theory in construction, applied in several key engineering structures in Sri Lanka. Since his graduation in 1936 until his death on 14 February 2006, his name has been written in golden letters in Sri Lankan civil engineering history. Colombo Planetarium, Kalutara Chaitya, Marine Drive at Colombo, including sea walls, new lighthouse and concrete roadways in pre-stressed concrete, fishing ports at Galle, Mirissa, Tangol, Jaffna and Beruwala, construction of cement factory at Putlam are a few of his constructions. He was a devoted Buddhist and helped construction of Kotmale Mahavali Mahasaya and Buddha Jayanti Chaitya at the Colombo Harbour. Engineering research and development was virtually non-existent during the colonial rule in the Sri Lanka, in the country. This activity was deliberately discouraged during this period as it would have been detrimental to the interest of the colonial power. Everything that was required in the way of materials and equipment had to be imported from manufacturers in the United Kingdom. No industrial development took place other than the production of tea, rubber, and coconut, which were exported to be processed abroad. Under these conditions, there was no scope at all for engineering research and development till independence in 1948. Thereafter, the priority given for the development projects that were carried out provided the opportunities for research and development. The establishment of the State Engineering Corporation in January 1962 provided further opportunities for engineering research and development. He has become the chairman and director of many other leading positions in many well-known organizations in Sri Lanka. Some of them are founder, chairman, and general manager, State Engineering Corporation of Sri Lanka, founder, chairman of the National Engineering Research and Development NERD of Sri Lanka, founder, chairman of the Central Engineering Consultancy Bureau, CCB of Sri Lanka, founder, chairman of the Sri Lanka Association of the Institution of Civil Engineers, that is UK, SLACE, president of the Institution of Sri Lanka IESL in 1969, president, National Academy of Sciences, also chancellor of the Open University of Sri Lanka. Also, he held director of State Hardware Corporation, Ceylon Steel Corporation, Lanka Leyland Limited, Colombo Low-Lying Areas Reclamation Board, Ceylon Tire Corporation, and member of the Council of Ceylon Bureau of Standards. Professor Kulasinghe was honored with the following titles awarded to him. President's Prize from the Institution of Engineers India for Best Invention in Pre-stressing in 1960. Doctor of Science from University of Moratuwa in 1979. National Honor Vidya Jyoti Class 1 conferred by the late President Julius Richard Jayawardena on the Independence Commemoration Day 4th February 1986. Conferred the degree of Doctor of Engineering by the Open University of Sri Lanka in the year 2000. Award of the National Honor titled Deshabandhu by President Mrs. Chandrika Kumaratunga Bandaranaike in 2005. ISL also commemorating every year on his birthday the Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe Memorial Lecture. So thousands of concrete structures will be built in Sri Lanka, but the name of Dr. A.N.S. Kulasinghe will remain more than for thousands of years for his dedication to develop Sri Lanka infrastructure. Saying that today on his 102nd birthday, once again, I warmly welcome you all for this grand occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your detailed introduction. Now let me take the privilege of introducing our speaker today. Engineer Dr. Ananda Ranasinghe is graduated from University of Ceylon, Peradeniya in engineering. He has obtained master's degrees in construction management and structural engineering. He has also obtained master's degrees in law from University of Wales and University of Colombo, and holds a PhD specialized in alternative dispute resolution. He has been a practicing engineer for nearly 35 years and a visiting lecturer at University of Peradeniya and University of Moratuwa. He is also a qualified attorney at law, was called to the bar in 1999. He is a fellow member of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, Institution of Civil Engineers UK, Institution of Structural Engineers UK, and the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators UK. He was a brigadier in the Sri Lanka Army and retired in year 2011. He held the position of President of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka in the session 2011-2012. Presently, he is engaged in dispute resolution in the construction industry. Dear Dr. Ranasinghe, it is over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Neil. President Mr. Dharmapala, and President-elect Arjuna Manamperi, past presidents of the institution, CEO Mr. Neil Abhisekara, members of the council, family members of the Kulasinghe, members of the ISL, invitees, and also especially to Engineer Lalit Pallegama for inviting me to deliver the lecture on behalf of the ISL. Today I thought I will discuss about disputes in the construction industry. The reason that I selected this topic is actually, although people have not realized, not people, even the engineers have not realized, it is presently is a very expensive item in the construction industry. Now, as a junior engineer, I can remember when I started doing construction supervision, designs, etc. I was told by my senior engineers that you have to economize your design and you have to economize your construction by managing your construction activities. And also I was able to save some money by economizing the design, by saving steel, saving concrete, etc. But when you compare the cost of claims that are claiming by the contractors in the industry today, I think it is worthwhile having a knowledge on these subjects, because the claims come into millions, not in millions, it's billions in billions of rupees. Now, for example, in the Southern Highway was constructed in sections. Southern Highway was not constructed by one contractor, it was done in sections. In one of the sections which I was involved as a DAB member, it went to arbitration for dispute resolution, and the cost of arbitration, that is including the arbitrators' fees, etc., exceeded 1 billion rupees, that is more than 100,000 million rupees. That is apart from the compensation the Sri Lankan government had to pay to the contractor. Now, about in 1970s and 80s, where I started my engineering education and also initial employment as an engineer, actually I started working at the Mahavali Development Board, and as young project engineers, we had ample freedom of doing whatever we wanted. I can remember we cleared thousands and thousands of acres for paddy cultivation for farmers, and we were not bothered about the value of timber which was in those jungles. Everything was fell down using tractors, bulldozers, etc., and they were set fire. So unfortunately, even the senior people did not give any idea about the value that we are destroying the timber, because it should have been preserved for construction at a future date by utilizing the timber that we have destroyed. Now, presently actually, when you are managing a construction contract, you have to use a standard document called conditions of contract. Now, conditions of contracts in Sri Lanka, most popular conditions of contracts are FIDIC and SIDA conditions of contract. Now, SIDA, they want to impose a regulation saying that all the conditions of in all contracts which are, unless it is a foreign funded project, they are insisting that SIDA conditions of contract has to be used in the construction industry. Now, the first thing that we must remember is actually when the employer enters into a contract with the contractor, they are the parties to the contract. There is no other person who is a party to the contract. So the main parties to the contract are the engineer and the employer and the contractor. However, although the employer and the contractor are parties to the contract, there are so many people listed in the conditions of contract. So therefore, as an engineer who is managing the contract shall taken into consideration that you have to preserve the rights and the responsibilities of the other professions, those who are involved in the construction. Those are basically subcontractors, nominated subcontractors, borrowing agency, dispute adjudication board, engineers representative, etc., etc. So therefore, when we are managing the contract as an engineer, which I will give the definitions later, you have to see that there are other people, those who are involved as a team in the construction project, and therefore you have to respect their rights and responsibilities as well. Now, unlike the projects that we constructed long time back in the 60s and 70s, or 70s and 80s, now the scenario has completely changed, because those days actually engineers were managing the project management on the engineering side, but among the contractors, mostly the contractors didn't have any background of engineering or construction management. So therefore, we could do whatever we instructed. It was done by the contractor without any grounding. Now the present situation is completely different, because in any project, when you want to start a project, you have to carry out what are called feasibility studies. So unless you do feasibility studies, the project will not be allowed. And also there are other issues that you have to consider, such as environmental factors, health and safety issues. And by considering all these things, actually you have to do a rational evaluation. That is what is lacking in some of the projects, even in the present government, using organic fertilizer, etc. That you have to evaluate rationally pros and cons of the outcome of your development work and make a decision. Now, for example, very recently you may have seen in the TV and also in the YouTube, removing the riprap by people in the Kalaweba tank. Now, normally when you do such a thing presently, you have to have a contingency plan. Supposing if there is a flood on the tank, what is going to happen to the entire reservoir? So therefore, there should be a contingency plan. So therefore, as engineers now, we have to think very far, not short thinking people are not only mathematically oriented people are not sufficient for the construction industry. We must have a very long vision, supposing if you are involved as an engineer in the construction industry. For example, those days actually we could go to any land and excavate and use for construction if you identify it properly. You can't do that because now presently you have to have sand permits. I can remember actually I was told by a contractor that if you want to extract rock from a rock in order for construction work, you have to go to 5 or 6 government agencies in order to get approval. So that is the form of construction that you have to follow, and you have to be mindful when you are doing at construction at the present stages. Therefore, as a result of difficulties where the engineer as well as the employer and the contractor is facing, there are a lot of disputes unlike those days in the construction industry, because most of the contracting organizations are managed by professional engineers, and they are very knowledgeable in the construction, and also they are very knowledgeable in construction management. So therefore, even for the slightest thing, if you do not manage your construction properly, there's going to be a construction claim, and sometimes exceeding the project cost. So if your project cost is 100 million, the claims come into more than 100 million. So therefore, you can't afford to do that. Now, there are other reasons which I want to discuss with you regarding the increase in disputes in the construction industry. Now, supposing if you plan a construction for 1 year And if the construction has to be increased by another 6 months, which means although contractor is paying for the construction work that is carried out, he has to bear the cost of overheads for the increased time. So therefore, when giving extensions to the contractor, one has to be very mindful. I don't mean that you should not give instructions, but as a professional engineer, you should evaluate the repercussions of giving extensions. So therefore, the main aim of the engineer who is managing the contract is to complete the project within the duration planned in the originally planned. So therefore, as design engineers or consultants in the construction industry, you have to plan the design or your designs, etc., so that you should be able to complete the works within the specified time that you make in your contract documents. So therefore, thorough study has to be done. Soil investigation, site investigation, everything has to be studied to in detail, so that during the process of construction, there will be no increase in construction time. Now, in the conditions of contract itself, actually, there is a provision for this increase in construction work called variations. Now, variations, although is specified in your general conditions of contract, it does not mean you are encouraged to do variations in a contract. Variations in a contract shall be done only when it is essential, so that you have to carry out this work. Now, for example, I can remember when I was working as a DAB member in one of the projects, the initial depth of excavation for improvement of groundworks was specified as 10 meters. Because the soil investigation, according to the soil investigation reports, the depth of excavation, the depth of bad soil was specified as 10 meters. However, during excavation, they have found that they have to go deeper than what was anticipated. So in such a situation, sometimes it is unavoidable because it's very difficult to predict the ground conditions even after doing soil investigations. Such cases are excusable. There is a provision in the conditions of contract, so you have to carry out variations. But I know that there are projects where the engineer has evaluated 100 cubic meters of earth to be excavated and backfill, but the excavation quantities comes to 500 cubic meters. So that is unexcusable. Now, sir, that type of variations are not allowed even in the conditions of contract. That is purely changing the scope of work, which is going to cost the employers very unreasonable amount of money, because employers, especially when they are planning for projects, they have to borrow money. They don't have money in order to carry out the project. What they do is actually they do a feasibility study of the project, and they say I have money in order to finance 25% of the project, and more than 75% of the project cost will be financed by loans from banks. Imagine that if the cost of the contract is increased by 100%, he will be in a very desperate situation, because it has to be financed by loans, which may not be readily available, and repayment also might be a very serious issue to the contractor. So therefore, as engineers, I think what I want to say is actually finalizing the design and issuing drawings in time is very important. So all the construction drawings as an engineer, you have to issue in time. Now, there are other reasons for change for the cause or disputes. Now, change in scope of work. What I want to stress this one actually, in a contract, contractor is not, an employee is not, or the engineer is not authorized to change the scope of work. That is, you are entering into a contract A and you are asking him to do contract B. So this type of instruction shall not be issued by the engineer. That change in scope is completely different to variations. I will give you an example. Now, in one of the projects, road projects, which I was a DAB member, the original plan was actually to do only up to the base level, that is up to the gravel surface level, and thereafter paving to be awarded to another contractor. That was the original plan of the contract. But the employer, due to various reasons, employer wanted to continue with the same contractor because he doesn't want to call tenders again, which is going to take her time consuming. So he gave an instruction, he through the engineer, he gave instruction to the contractor to carry out payment using asphalt, which is completely a new change of scope of work. So that shouldn't be allowed, that shouldn't be instructed to a contractor during construction. So you are allowed to do a variation only for the purpose of completion of the identified works, but not to issue instructions to change the work construction project A into a construction project B. Now, there are other issues. I think mostly my examples are from civil engineering because my background is a civil engineer. Now, there are other issues also I can remember. There was construction work that has to be done piling works have to be done before carrying out the superstructure. Now the investigations have done few boreholes and they have identified the rock levels. But unfortunately, when the piling contractor started construction of piles, which was at closer intervals than soil investigation, he encountered large quantities of concrete blocks, so that he had to penetrate or remove the concrete blocks in order to form his piles at the rock level. Now, in such a situation, actually, the contractor may have never anticipated that they had to remove so much of rock or so much of concrete blocks in order to drive the piles. So that is that became a very costly construction, and later they had to resort their disputes by going to arbitration. So therefore, this can be avoided by sufficient soil investigations, because soil investigations are very important in a civil engineering construction projects. Although it is going to be it is a costly item, it's going to save a lot of cost, project cost at a later stage. Now, the other thing is actually there should be a very good communication between the engineer and the contractor and the employer. Now, one thing the contractor engineer must remember is that engineer is supposed to supervise or manage the contract, but engineer can't change the contract between the employer and the contractor. What I mean is, I will give you an example. Let's say the contract says shuttering shall be removed within 28 days. But a smart engineer might think 28 days is not necessary. In order to expedite construction work, it could be removed within 14 days. Now that is completely an instruction against the contract agreed between the parties. So engineer is not allowed to issue instructions in order to change the conditions of contract. Now, very recently, I think probably our president might know, he led a delegation to the ministry in order to preserve the rights of the engineer as a project manager. So in order to highlight the role of the engineer, how important the role of engineer in the construction industry, I will read this definition. This is, I have extracted from Engineer FIDIC Conditions of Contract 1999. Engineer means the person appointed by the employer to act as the engineer for the purpose of the contract and named in the appendix to the tender, or other person appointed from time to time by the employer and nominated to the contract under subclause 3.4. So therefore, the engineer term is very important here. The term they are using, engineer term, is actually, he has to be a professional engineer in order to manage the contract. Now, in 2017, FIDIC has issued a revised version, and I will read that to show what steps they have taken in order to preserve the rights of the engineer and also to maintain quality of construction work. Now, I am reading from 2017 edition. The professional engineer, I will read from the beginning. The engineer, or if a legal entity, the natural person appointed to act on behalf, shall be a professional engineer having suitable qualifications. You can see that in the FIDIC new version, they have said engineer to the contract. He is not the design engineer or the design consultant. He's telling the manager who is going to manage the contract has to be a professional engineer having suitable qualifications, professional engineer having suitable qualifications, experience and competence to act as the engineer under the contract. So therefore, people in the construction industry, those are preparing these documents, especially internationally, they have realized the importance of having an engineer as a project manager, because mostly the problems that you encounter in the construction site is technical issues mostly. There are contractual issues, so therefore, as engineers, those who are practicing in the industry, my strong advice is actually you have all the technical capabilities to be qualified as an engineer and to manage the contract, but you should be well aware of the project management or the contract documents as well, because the industry requires that type of person in order to manage the projects. Now, I was telling earlier also, now there was a move to oust engineers from the construction of buildings very recently, where I think President defended very successfully, and the Secretary accepted that you can't dominate construction by any other professional than engineers. Now, the engineer also must realize that he can't manage a project on his own. So therefore, there is certain delegation has been allowed in construction projects in order for the engineer to manage the construction projects, because the construction projects are very large construction projects where only one person cannot manage the construction. So therefore, there is a provision in the conditions of contract stating that the engineer may from time to time again duties and delegate authority to assistants, and may also revoke such assignment or delegation. Therefore, you can, as an engineer, if you are appointed as an engineer, you can delegate your rights to another person who is knowledgeable in engineering, not to any other person. These assistants may be resident engineer and no independent inspectors appointed to inspect and to test item of plant or materials. The assignment, delegation or revocation shall be in writing. So that is also very important, because these contracts actually, word of mouth will not work in contracts, because this has to be recorded. So therefore, it says that as an engineer, you can delegate your powers to another person or persons, but only thing is it should be recorded, it should be in writing. And also, once the power is delegated to another engineer, the engineer who received the delegated powers, or the officer who received the delegated powers, he must act within the delegation. He can't delegate that powers to another person, because he has received delegation from the engineer to the project. So therefore, there are various issues that are emanating in the construction industry, and in order for you to manage the construction contracts, you have to have fair knowledge in the construction administration as well as the conditions of contract. Now, engineers are very reluctant to read these conditions of contract, but probably if you have done mathematics in your engineering course, I think these things are very simple, because these are much simpler than complicated mathematics that you have done at the universities. Now, there are various other reasons where there are claims submitted by the engineer. And now, FIDIC clause 3.4 says that, I will read that clause also. The engineer has a serious responsibility of making determinations with respect to the disputes in the construction industry. Now, I am reading from FIDIC 3.5 determination. Now, we can see whenever these conditions provided, the engineer shall proceed in accordance with subclause 3.5 to agree or determine any matter. The engineer shall consult with each party in an endeavor to reach an agreement. So therefore, this is a very good advice to the engineer, because he must attempt to make a settlement between the parties. Always, you don't have to take a stick and instruct the contractor. you must try to reach an agreement between the employer and the contractor before making a decision. That is very good as advice. I would like to make a quotation on this one because, and it's, I am reading from a quotation which I have copied by Joseph Franklin. An ounce of mediation is worth a pound of arbitration, a ton of litigation. So therefore you have to, because sometimes actually although you think the contractors do not have such a knowledge in administering the contract, contractors are now very clever in managing the contracts because they are qualified people and they have studied these conditions of contract. So therefore, even there is a provision in the conditions of contract in the document, feeding document, that the engineer must decide, so the engineers must determine the matter in order to make a settlement between the parties, endeavor to reach an agreement. If agreement is not achieved, the engineer shall make a fair determination in accordance with the contract. Now, this statement is very important. Since I have very limited time, I am touching only the important aspects. Now, it says, if agreement is not achieved, the engineer shall make a fair determination. So, engineer has a power to make a determination in accordance with the contract. He can't go and outside and make a decision. Now, sometimes actually I have seen engineers are partial because they think they are being paid by the employer, therefore they must take the side of the employer. But engineer's role is a neutral role. Sometimes he has to act as an umpire or a neutral mediator in the construction management. So therefore, engineer must take a very neutral role and he must make a fair determination so that dispute will not arise thereafter, because disputes are very expensive in the construction industry. Now, you can't be fair to, in the sense actually you can't make a determination against the conditions of contract that you have agreed or against the normal norms. Now, I have copied from this wording or this dicta from a judge, which is a case decided in Sri Lanka, Kotalawala versus W.H. Pereira. It says that justice must be done according to law. If hardships result from the law in force, the remedy must be effected by legislation. There would be chaos if a judge was entitled to create a procedure to meet exigencies of every case in which he considers the law would work injustice. So therefore, when you make a decision whether the contractor's rates are very high or very low, whatever it is not the time to adjust the rates when you started construction. When you award the contract to the contractor, now it is too late to adjust the rates to the contractor, or in favor of the contractor or in favor of the employer. You have to decide according to the contract, even though, for example, let's say if the contract says the cube of earthwork is 100 rupees, but it is going to cost 1,000 rupees, you can't make adjustments at that stage because you have to manage as an engineer according to the terms of the contract that you have entered. Again, I would like to quote another decision made in a court of law. No court may disregard the law of the land or purport in any given case to ignore its provisions. Where a matter has been specifically dealt with or provided for by law, there can be no question that the law must prevail, for justice must be done according to the law. So therefore, if you are, as an engineer, if you are making a decision, you must make a decision according to the prevailing law or the conditions of contract that you have entered into, not you, the employer has entered into with the contractor, and not by feeling sympathy to the contractor or to the employer. So therefore, this is very important. Now, mostly I want to touch a little bit of dispute resolution methods also. Basically, therefore, as I said, discussed earlier, initially the dispute resolution mechanism should initiate by the engineer according to clause 3.5 of the conditions of contract. Thereafter, if the parties are not satisfied with the dispute resolution in the construction industry, they'll have to resort to dispute adjudication board. Now, Institution of Engineers, we are maintaining a list of dispute adjudicators, which is a very positive step towards resolving construction disputes in the industry. Only thing is actually you as engineers also who are managing the contracts must remember most of the disputes has to be resolved technically and not legally. That you should bear in mind. So therefore, you shall not allow parties to disregard the dispute resolution process which is embedded in the construction documents and allow them to go to litigation or arbitration, because most of the problems that you are facing in the construction industry, according to my experience, is construction technical issues and not any legal issues. Because when you go to courts or further litigation, what will happen is actually people are wasting time and money by having long arguments on these things. Now, there is another issue which I would like to tell at the stage of preparation of construction documents. One has to be very mindful, because now most of the contracts that we enter today are international contracts where there is a local component as well as a foreign component. Now, as you know, the US dollar is rising, our rupee is depreciating very badly. And therefore, if the parties have agreed into signing a contract in US dollars, partly US dollars and partly Sri Lankan rupees, when we convert local currency into US dollars, the payments that has to be made to the contractor is substantial. So those things also have to be considered when preparation of documents and also when resolving disputed matters. So therefore, mostly dispute resolution disputes might be due to trivial reasons in the construction industry or maybe due to serious issues. Now, I can remember in one of the projects, the grade of concrete that has to be used in the construction was specified as grade 30. Now, the contractor came up with the problem because he said, your method of testing of concrete is cylinders, but I don't have sample cylinders in order to test concrete. May I use cubes in order to test concrete? So that is fine, because there is another specification for checking cubes and there is another specification for checking cylinders. It is not an issue which has to be created by the engineer in order to have another dispute. So what the engineer did was actually, he said, no, instead of grade 30 concrete, now since you are testing cubes, you have to use grade 35 concrete, which is completely a wrong design. So therefore, as engineers, when you are managing contract, you have to use your technical hat as well, in addition to the management of the contract, and see whether it's testing cylinders or testing cubes. What is required is grade 30 concrete, not grade 35. Therefore, asking the contractor to produce grade 35 concrete is completely a wrong decision made by the engineer. So therefore, from the stage of preparation of the documents, the engineer has to play a role. I may give another example before we close down. Now, in one of the projects, the bitumen has to be measured in tons instead of volume measurement. The bitumen had to be measured in tons. Now, when you have a specification in order for the contractor to say bitumen has to be measured in tons before spreading, he has to pass through a weighbridge and also weigh the bitumen. Now, what will happen, supposing if there is a serious undulations in your base course, he is going to correct all these mistakes by laying from bitumen. So therefore, unnecessarily you are paying the contractor for tonnage, because he is going to level the surfaces also with bitumen. So therefore, preparation of the documents, specifications also, you have to think very far in order to make the project very successful, because making the project very successful does not mean you are completing the project. One has to complete the project in time and also within the cost specified in the contract. So therefore, there is a greater role that has to be played to the engineers in managing contracts. And therefore, I would like to close my discussion by this one. I will close my discussion with a quotation which I have copied, which was made by Sir Winston Churchill. It says, when you are at the edge of a cliff, sometimes progress is a step backwards. Now, what it means actually, settlement of disputes is very essential in the construction industry before it reaches stage of litigation or arbitration. In order to do that, actually, you have to be very thorough with your terms of contract, and engineers also should be aware that they have no power to alter the terms of the contract. Before closing my speech, I may thank to IESL for giving me an opportunity to deliver the prestigious lecture, Dr. A.N.S. Kunselman lecture, and also especially to the chairman and the civil sectional committee, Pallegama chairman and sectional committee, for inviting me to deliver this lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ranasinghe, for your highly informative speech. You have touched a very vital area which must be known by any practicing engineer. Within the IESL, we encounter many disputes among clients and contractors. Yeah, most of the time, engineers involved would have resolved. Once again, thank you very much. So, to wind up the session, now I kindly request Engineer Lalit Pallegama, Chairman of the Civil Engineering Sectional Committee of the IESL, to deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Engineer Neil. Dear President and President-elect of IESL and Council members, past presidents, and especially our resource person, Engineer Dr. Anand Ranasinghe, and family members and relatives of late Dr. Kulasinghe, and my dear engineers. It is a great privilege to address you all to deliver a vote of thanks. Mainly, I wanted to highlight two things. Especially, I always admire the things done by Dr. Kulasinghe, and I personally am trying to learn a lot of things with those things. And about our resource person, we all know one of our past presidents, and not only that, I personally know how he is working for the IESL and benefit to the engineers. So we would like to appreciate it and thanks Dr. Anand Ranasinghe. We know he is expert on this subject, and he has shared valuable experience and knowledge with all of us. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for your great lecture. Then I would like to thank our president of IESL, and he has delivered very valuable introductory lecture. And then I would like to thank all past presidents and president-elect and council members who has participated in this event. Then I must thank Engineer Neil, our CEO of IESL, who has conducted and organized this event. Then I would like to thank all participants, and I know you all had a good opportunity to get good knowledge on this subject. At last but not least, I must thank all secretariat staff of IESL who has organized and give an opportunity to conduct this lecture. Finally, I would like to share one of the idea I have. What Dr. Kulasinghe has done, he has determined to help the country in its hour of need. So our responsibility is to do same thing, that this is the moment that country needs our strength and our capacity. So that may be most appropriate way to show our sincere gratitude to late Dr. Kulasinghe, our master of engineer, our master of concrete. Thank you very much for your participation. Stay safe. Good night.